If, by our late middle age, we begin to really live, although by then it's almost too late, then it's because our prior life was but a preparation. In our 40s, there may have been more work than play as we solidified our careers and guided our children on. Our 20s had demanded of us the unsettling stresses of graduating college, finding a job, wooing a mate, and buying a home. In our teens, although the hormones were flowing wildly, we were oft thwarted by the cell walls of study, curfew, and sexual responsibility. Only as children were we almost free, but even then the shadow of authority everywhere passed as a dark cloud. It is only when we spread into middle age, say at age 50 or so, that we finally reap some real interest from the dues that we've paid. We are free to live and write, to fully create art, life, and love, albeit though that death's faint knockings have already sounded in our hearts, and that time's corruption is in the wrinkled skin that we may try to stretch baby smooth. A step or two is lost in tennis, and age is noted in the graying of the flower, although the root may still be green. Yet for all this, there is a new exuberance that never was, a realization at last of the worthiness of life, of its precious pleasures, of the promotion of the spirit to a higher plan, a complete removal of oneself from parts of life that suddenly appear quite needless, and a determination to live even more, the way we would have if we could have ditched out of all work and worry. Still, the unseen but still sensed specter of old age yet looms, but it's well around the corner. Not even an enemy, but a most inspiring presence which promotes living, not dying. So one is reborn. This and that home improvement seems no more to matter so much as does creation, friends, health, adventure, and loving. It was from such an outlook, with this long view across the years, that Brother Peter and Sister Angelina met again in another, later life, although of course they really didn't realize this right away, that they'd known each other in some other past, somewhere in time in a previous past called fumes from ancient times. She, although lovable, caring, affectionate, and loyal, was separated from a second marriage that just wasn't meant to be, and he, although happy, felt alone at times, socially believing that all life was in meeting people, for he was a poet whose intensity of observation spread far into life, and therefore demanded that daydreams come true. There was a vitality of life that couldn't be contained. That Peter and Angelina were each fair, well-read, honest, spontaneous, and especially romantically adventurous guaranteed that love would build between them. A love that, while aspiring to heaven like the tip of a pyramid, would stand firmly on its own ground amid the shifting sands, its foundation the basis for ascension. This mist of love would envelop them as they fearlessly lived and loved again. They met in Rhinecliff, a riverside country town that still had front porches with ceiling swings and tables where grandmothers played canasta, rummy, and hearts. Angelina, an artist, drew Peter's attention as she sketched dress patterns on an easel in the corner of the wooden porch of the old Victorian home. Peter's eyes wandered through the scene, and thence upwards toward the center cupola, that lone guardian of the town, with its three-windowed view of the past, present, and future. Angelina watched as Peter's sight passed along the roof lines to the neatly tiled slate by the downspouts. He felt the warmth of her attention on him and the inevitable culmination of their glances. Following the green drain pipe, down past the first story, his vision crossed over to the porch railing, like a squirrel probing for crumbs, and made the steady gaze that neither of them dared to turn aside, even out of politeness. There was, of course, a certain attraction born from the fumes of ancient times. Seeing only three at the card table, Peter irrevocably turned up the broad sidewalk to the front steps of the gingerbread house and asked if they need a fourth. They did, those mothers of mothers, and so they took him in as a player. Not oblivious to the first sparks of young love, they changed the game to hearts. After he overplayed the first hand and gathered up the penalty of the Queen of Spades, a glass of milk and a plate of cookies appeared at his elbow, as if by magic. But it was from an angel, and thus he was made the acquaintance of Angelina. There was a knowing, even then, of the things that were meant to be, a feeling, although time could not be hurried, that they would soon be one and the same in love. Peter soon regained his card-playing form and shot the moon a few times, for he'd programmed the game of hearts on a computer, and although his memory was neither electronic nor photographic, He had remembered the many hints and clues that he'd built into the program, those little signs that meant a lot, the avoidance of a spade lead perhaps, or the apparently careless lead of a suit that had been led one too many times. The grandmothers were all experienced though, and so the game was evenly adventurous for all, and after luck or not had chanced on each of them in turn, the game came down but to a few nuances like bluffs built on prior patterns of play, and Peter placed a close second, a ticket as it turned out, for tomorrow's game. After the elder players discreetly evaporated into the house, the porch and its swing were left to Peter and Angelina, whereupon they passed into each other some of the history of their joys and turmoil during one long autumn afternoon. Angelina's teenage daughter Jean arrived, the one bright spot from a dark past, for Jean was like the new light of dawn in the east when the bulk of night, like a bad marriage, had gone west. Jean nodded her approval of Peter, done more so by the pleased look on her mother's face than by knowing anything about him. The autumnal night eventually fell like a knell, the sun plummeting into the recesses of the Catskills across the Hudson River. The coolness of the air was a hint that Peter should not overstay his welcome. As a good writer, Peter knew that it was best to wrap up the day's words at a point when one knew what was next to be written, in order to sleep on it, and let the directives work themselves into the formulations that would flow without hesitation onto the paper the next day. She too sensed this, and yet they needed a magic moment, some sort of romantic beginning, and it soon came with the fireflies, as the couple watched the winkings and blinkings of the females in the grass that were the yes-no signals to the males in the air, those pulses of love flashing in their green and yellow light, the nodding inquiries twinkling like stars, the mating calls from luminated pods, the tracers pulsing wild, the searching thoughts that smiled, from Angelina to Peter as she leaned over and kissed him, and back came the beacon of his reply. A light, oh yes, said his lips as he returned her kiss, and another kiss as well as they stood and embraced in an electric hug, now all aglow like lightning bugs.